I call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I will open with an invocation, and then Mr. Miller will lead us into pledge. Please rise. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time together as a board as we come to consider the matters of the county. We thank you for the break in the weather and the cooler weather we have. We just ask that you watch over us, Lord, and give us good wisdom. We ask that you be with the teachers in the schools as they start their new school year this year. Just bless the students and the teachers and the staff, and just allow them to be successful and just to do your will, Lord. Just guide us in our decision making tonight. Help us to make good decisions, Lord, decisions that would honor you and glorify you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you. We will move on to amendments to the agenda. Mr. Miller, do we have any amendments?
I believe there was a part of the minutes that needed to be amended.
Okay, we will address that when it comes time to adopt the minutes.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. In that case, we will move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Please state your name and your address, and then you will have your 3 minutes. So if anyone is here for public comment, please approach the podium now. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online for public comment?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Did anyone receive any correspondence to be entered into the record? Okay. Oh. In that case, we will close public comment. Mr. Stonehill, is everything okay? Do you need a moment? Okay. Okay. In that case, we'll go to reports from members of the board. We'll start with you, Mrs. Binder.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to start off by wishing the students and staff of all the schools in King George good luck on the new school year. Should be exciting and fun. Hopefully it'll be a little bit nice, warm, but not too hot for the first start of the school year. And I'm glad to see some of the administration and school member out here to come to our meeting. Thank you for stopping by. Some things I did this in the time we've off. It's been a couple weeks since we had our last meeting. I attended another HB 206 meeting. It was very informative. I learned a lot about soil compaction from an expert from Virginia Tech, and it concerns solar farms. It also goes for a lot of other projects that we'll be doing in the county. And it was very interesting, and I understand why some of my plants don't grow in my garden. I need to be a little bit better about tilling that soil. So it was very informative, and if anyone wants to see it, just email me and I can send it to you. It was a lot of information. Also went to the Affordable Housing State Work Group where Davenport and Associates were there talking about bonding and grants, and it was very informative. So thank you. And you heard the audience. So that was some good information. And then I also attended the coalition of the High Growth Coalition, I always get it wrong, committee meeting in Culpeper, and where we talked a lot about affordable housing. And I also attended with Mr. Stonehill and Mr. Minor the designation of the Northern Neck Heritage Area. And I thank Congress for passing that and the President signing it into order to recognize our Northern Neck. A lot of people don't realize that King George is part of the Northern Neck Heritage Area because they just assume that it's Westmoreland and everything down there. But we are the gateway to the Northern Neck. So it was a good event, and learned a lot of information for some of the folks that were there about some history I didn't know about, and it's always great to learn a lot more because you always should be learning. So thank you, Lisa Hull and her staff for putting that together at Stratford Hall. And I think that's all. That was all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Bender. Mr. Collins.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings. Thank you for coming out. Dr. Boyd, you have I met your assistant superintendent yesterday. Would you mind introducing him to the rest of the folks?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is Dr. Troy Wright. You want me to come to the podium? Good evening, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for putting me on the spot, TC, and I'll
You're
put you
welcome.
now on the spot, Dr. Wright. Dr. Wright joins us from Riverbend High School, where he's the former principal there. He's been with us now for how many weeks? 3 weeks, and has already made a great impact in our school division. If you had the opportunity to come to our convocation on Monday, he had a pivotal role there, helped out rolling our new school year out, and has done a number of great things already in our school division. So I'm personally very excited to have him in King George County. Thank you. Thank you, TC.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Constituent asked me a question that I couldn't answer. It was on the financials. It was a didgeridoo show for $450. Could you give me some more information on that from the library? Also, at the Minion meeting, when we had the joint meeting, I asked many questions and I asked them to get back to me, and they have not answered any questions, have not gotten back to me. If they've gotten back to you, I haven't heard about it. Tonight's night out up there at the high school. If you don't like this meeting, you can go up there and have a good time. I thank everyone and hope everybody has a good summer and good start of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mrs. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here this evening. I mentioned this at the Service Authority Board of Directors meeting. However, it has a bearing on public health, so I will mention it here as well. I want to thank Bowdoin and our staff for providing information to our customers in the Dahlgren area about the possibility of lead in their water due to the age of their homes and the pipes that were installed at the time. There's some information on how to flush your lines, etc., on the Service Authority website. On Wednesday, July 12th, attended the joint meeting with the Planning Commission and Dominion Power. On Thursday, July 13th, I attended the ribbon cutting for the Siddell Brooks Junior Park Picnic Shelter. Thank you to staff, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and the King George Garden Club for hosting that event. On Tuesday, July 25th, I participated in a ride-along in the meadows at Dahlgren with All Points Broadband personnel to view status of our broadband grant project. So the poles have been installed anywhere there was one necessary. The electric providers have made those installations. The lines have been strung, and now the All Points Broadband subcontractor is installing the fiber along the lines. Representatives will attend one of our September meetings to provide us another update, and also asked me to pass on to my colleagues, if you would like to do a ride-along, please send Tom Innes an email so they can get you on the schedule. And the project currently is on track for a first connection in our community in October and completion at the end of the calendar year. And then lastly, regarding the public comment alleging video and printed minutes were deleted, I'd like to read aloud the official county statement. During the June 6th King George Board of Supervisors meeting, a portion of the YouTube live stream was unknowingly interrupted by an unstable internet connection. The county is unaware of any other instance where an unstable internet connection has interrupted a recording of a live stream. Transcripts of live recordings are used to create meeting minutes. Due to the unstable internet connection, some of the recording was not transcribed into the original minutes that were approved during the June 20 Board of Supervisors meeting. However, once the county was made aware of this issue, the county retrieved the hard drive recording of the June 6 meeting and posted the complete recording to the county's YouTube on July 12th. The meeting minutes were amended to reflect the complete recording transcript and can be found here. The minutes will be formally ratified at the August 1st meeting tonight, later on. And now that King George County is aware this issue can occur with an unstable internet connection, it will be altering its transcription process to no longer use the live stream recording and instead utilize the hard drive recording that does not rely on internet connection. The public is encouraged to attend and speak during Board of Supervisors meetings. The board regularly meets on the first and third Tuesday of each month unless otherwise advertised. So I'd like to thank the citizen who brought this concern forward to us during public comment. I did contact him the very next day. And me personally, I want to say that I'm very proud of our staff, and I know that none of them would purposely delete anything in the minutes, nor would they purposely delete content on a YouTube video. And I also want to state for the record that in addition to that citizen, there were 2 other citizens' public comments who had 3 dots and ellipsis, which means it did not transcribe from the recording. As well, Chairman Granger had some comments later in the meeting that were not complete. So I am very confident in our staff and that there was no ill intent in how this played out. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. Mr. Stonehill?
Thank you. Thanks for everybody that came out to the audience. I had I don't want to get this all started again, but I did have a very long phone conversation, about an hour or so, with a citizen in King George that is actually from the, probably going to mess it up, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area. That's where I guess the Pyramid Health folks came from, and he had really terrible, very negative things to say about what has happened in that area with that company. And now he's here, and he's concerned that it's kind of followed him here to King George. But I was hoping he was going to come out and speak tonight, to give you all some kind of firsthand info of that area, which I don't really know much about, but hopefully he'll come at some other point. And then, as Mrs. Spindler said, July 17th, we went to the launch and celebration program of the Northern Neck National Heritage Area, which is they actually started the paperwork on that process back in 2000. So it took 23 years for the government, I know that's surprising, to get this all done, and get it passed and get Congress and the president to pass it. But yeah, it's a great thing here for the entire Northern Neck. As Mrs. Binder said, we are definitely the gateway to the Northern Neck. So that was a great program. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. I'd just like to say thank you for everyone coming out. Welcome, Dr. Wright. I really appreciate you being out here and the opportunity we did meet at the convocation ceremony, but thanks for coming out to the meeting as well, and good luck with the schools this year. It's exciting to have you here, so thank you. Mr. Jones, I apologize for the confusion last meeting. I know we don't normally have you come until the second meeting, and we only had the one in July. And so I apologize to you for that confusion, because I was thinking we should have you. And but thank you for coming this meeting. I know it's not regular, but I appreciate you being here to report on the June ones, since we didn't only have the one meeting in July. So thank you for that. And then let's see here. I would just like again say thank you to Dr. Boyd and the schools and the staff for the opportunity to come and speak with the teachers and the rest of the staff at the convocation ceremony. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to have that. And we really wish you guys the best of luck this year. And I'm sure it'll be great. So look forward to great things from the schools. And that is all I have. So I will move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, if we could adopt all of the items, save 08-01.5, and approve the minutes individually, as there is one minor edit that I believe you pointed out that we'd like to capture this evening.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll move to adopt consent agenda items 08-01 through 08-01.4.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the amended June 6, 2023 King George County Board of Supervisor meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to adopt the July 11th, 2023 King George County Board of Supervisor meeting minutes with a minor amendment on page 14 of the minutes at 45 minutes, 23.3 seconds. There is a statement. Do we have any other questions for the sheriff? Okay, thank you, sir. It was previously attributed to Mr. Miller. It should be attributed to Chairman Richard Granger.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'll move adoption of the July 12th, 2023 King George County Board of Supervisors and King George County Planning Commission Joint Work Session Meeting Minutes.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kupka. I appreciate that. All right, we'll move on to constitutional officers' reports. We'll start with the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office for the monthly report. Do we not have that? The 15th. So, say it again. Okay. So you were saying she's supposed to come last meeting, we didn't get the information because there was an issue with the connection. So I didn't know if we had it. If we don't and we get it at the 15th, I'll ask to have all that information provided at the 15th then.
I apologize.
It's okay.
So the agenda led me to believe that she was going to bring it all on the August 15th.
Okay.
But I do have the report that she can be heard on the speaker there.
Yes, that'd be great.
So July 22nd to present, $1,840,000. Total revenue was $4,187,402. Total packs of cigarettes sold in May 2023, 314,666.
Do we have any questions? Ms. Puck, I appreciate it. Thank you. I apologize for putting you on the spot like that, but thank you for the information provided. Thank you. All right. In that case, we will move on to Mr. Jones.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. A couple of things with my office first before I give the report. Tax bills have been mailed. So constituents, if you have not received the bill, please give our office a call. We can issue a duplicate bill via email or mail, or just give the total over the phone. So again, if you have not received a bill, you should have one by now. Please give our office a call. One other issue to address, we've had a few calls to our office about delinquent notices or delinquent amounts printing on bills, then customers go online and it's no longer there. After some investigation, we've had a few customers where it was indeed delinquent. However, we had not received the payment from our collection agency or the tax withholding program that we have. We've since got that payment in after the printing of the bill. So after research, indeed has been paid, but it's just a timing issue with the bill. So in each of the issues that we've had, that's what we've found there. So again, same deal though. If you have any questions about anything that you have on your bill, please don't hesitate to call our office. Now, June's financial report. We began the month of June with a balance of $32 million in the general fund, $32,436,098.88. The county received $24,065,103.01 in revenue. We dispersed $24,508,051.22, leaving a balance of $31,993,150.67. This has not been reconciled to the general ledger because that usually waits until after the final audit, which I believe the auditors are here in the middle of September. So, any questions?
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it, Mr. Jones. Did anyone have any questions?
I just have one comment. I want to thank you and your staff that what you did in the treasurer's office for the ease of use with your new setup with the place for handicapped folks to come and be able to pay their bills and the new way they can go up and pay their bills. It looks really nice. And they did a really good job designing it. And I've heard a lot of people make compliments about it.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for approving it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you. I just want to thank you, Mr. Jones, for responding. I believe Chairman Granger and I sent the same citizen your way with regard to the issues with her tax bill. So thank you very much for,
Spoke to her today.
yep, thank you very much for addressing that.
Sounds good. Thanks. Any other questions?
I think we're good, but thank you, Mr. Jones. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you. See you later.
You have a good one. All right, we'll move on to the county attorney's report. Ms. Lackey.
Good evening. The first item I have is a proposed draft for design build guidelines. The purchasing ordinance has a passing reference, almost a placeholder to design build procurement method in compliance with state code is what it says, but the county has never adopted design build guidelines, at least according to Travis, who is my good authority on the goings on of the history of construction and procurement in the county. And so to my knowledge, there has never been design build guidelines adopted in the county. This is an optional procurement method under state code. But if you do adopt guidelines, those guidelines do have to generally follow the same guidelines for the state that are issued through the Secretary of Administration. The Secretary of Administration last updated guidelines in 2020. In general, you have to have a selection panel. The selection panel has to include either an architect or an engineer. That can be the staff or consultant. There's a two-step bidding process, which has a qualifications process, and then of the qualified candidates, you then have a competitive negotiation among the candidates who qualify. Price is a critical factor in award, but unlike invitations to bid, where the primary or sometimes the only criteria is price, price is a critical factor, but doesn't have to be the predominant or only factor in award. And there can be efficiencies to having a single firm or a joint venture, because a design build is when you hire one entity or a contractual relationship, a joint venture between a design firm and a construction firm, that you just have one contract where you get the project designed and built. So there sometimes are efficiencies to using this method. And so it came up recently that it might be a mechanism for a relatively small project, but sometimes you can get a project done that way where you design and have it constructed. So I just wanted to bring this forward as proposed guidelines. I know you all are just setting eyes on this, so I fully anticipate that you might want to take some time to think about it and bring it back as a future action item. But I just wanted to go ahead and put the draft for you. I will say that Travis and Bryce have looked at it. And Megan's looked at it as well.
Ms. Lackey, I really appreciate you bringing this to us to consider. I will ask, so you said that it's available through the state guidelines. How tailored is this from what like the state would say is an acceptable ordinance, I guess, or is it pretty open on how they allow us to craft it?
It's pretty similar to the state process. It doesn't include some of the processes that are required. And then because there's a small procurement threshold allowed by state law, I included a small procurement process that's a little bit less complicated than, so if your project is under $200,000, I think is the threshold, you can have a slightly abbreviated process.
Okay. Did anyone have any other questions for Ms. Lackey about this topic in particular? Is there any interest in possibly looking to bring it back? I'll just ask my colleagues. I know it's a fair amount to look to. I'm not asking to bring it back at the next meeting, but to read through it more and then make a decision if we would like to advertise, I guess, for a public hearing, since it's an ordinance change.
It actually, if I may, Mr. Chair, it's not an ordinance change. It's just it's a kind of an odd thing. It's a policy, but it has to be a policy approved by the board. So I'd probably draft you all a resolution to approve the guidelines at a future meeting or to consider.
Apologies. It's all existing purchasing ordinance. That section. I thought it had to be codified in that. So apologies, but okay. I would like to look at it a little bit more. I did read through it, but yeah.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question thinking about it right now. How does that conflict with the construction manager at risk?
So they're both considered alternate procurement methods. So a construction manager at risk, you usually have at least some level of design is performed by a third party, and then you hire another firm to construct according to those designs, and they can have some input on the design to hopefully reduce some of the costs and things. But you have a separate designer and a separate builder. With the design build, there's usually a hyphen in between design build, because it's instead of design bid build, you have just design build. You have one contract and one entity, or perhaps a joint venture who does both functions.
So it's that bid part in the middle that's taken out. So we don't currently have a policy for that, but we do for the other two, design, bid, build, and construction manager at risk.
Right. So we have a process where we do bids. So you could bid the design and have someone complete the design, and then you bid the construction. So this would be a mechanism where you can select a one entity or a team to both design and construct through just one procurement, not two.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do you have another item, Ms. Lackey?
I do. So the second item I have is an update on the status of the purchase agreement for the site proposed for the relocation of the Dahlgren Fire and Rescue Station. In April, this board authorized the execution of a purchase and sale agreement to acquire approximately 3.15 acres from Oakland Baptist Church. That agreement contemplated that the conveyance would be the result of a subdivision. However, a draft subdivision plat was prepared and reviewed by community development. They determined that under the subdivision ordinance, there would have to be access to an undeveloped parcel owned by the church that would require curb, gutter, sidewalk, and also buffering. So it would impact the current parking area of the church. So we looked for alternatives, and we discovered that if we did a boundary line adjustment plat rather than a subdivision plat, we could avoid the need for those type of improvements, which would be of limited benefit in this situation because it's to an undeveloped parcel that also happens to be owned by the church. The church is receptive to this concept. In fact, they have requested that the county vacate all their lot lines. They own 3 parcels. So rather than owning 3 parcels, they would like to own just one and convey a small parcel to the county. So there's a proposed purchase agreement amendment whereby rather than a subdivision plat, the county would complete the preparation, or a consultant would complete the preparation of a boundary line adjustment plat. We think that we can accomplish this within the initial, well, not the initial, but the feasibility period that was provided in that purchase agreement that was executed in April allowed a feasibility period through August 19th. But in the proposed amendment, there's a very slight extension that can be provided for if necessary through the end of the month. So I'm requesting authority from the board to authorize Mr. Miller to execute a purchase agreement amendment as presented in the agenda packet.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Lackey about this? Go ahead, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lackey, that you mentioned a conveyance of a small additional piece of property to the county. Is that at no addition? Is that?
No, if I said I misspoke, it's just the slightly larger than 3 acre site is the county acquisition.
Okay.
And the church would retain the residual property, but the lot lines between those properties would be vacated.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Ms. Lackey, what is the status of the 21st Amendment to the landfill?
Mr. Miller and I had scheduled a meeting with Waste Management, which was canceled at the last minute by Waste Management due to a medical emergency, and we have a meeting scheduled the end of this week.
So at that meeting, you've asked for stuff, money, and they're going to either tell you or not tell you or give you a different number. Is that correct? Is that what that meeting's about?
We're still in negotiations. We had our last sit-down negotiation was in June, I believe. And then, as I said, we had a second meeting scheduled, and it unfortunately fell through. So we're still continuing the negotiation process to bring something forward for the board to act on.
Could you keep me a little more advised of that? I've been following that, and also I'm on the Landfill Advisory Committee. And I'd like to have some background knowledge as we move forward with that?
Sure, I can report back after this next meeting. There have not been any significant drafting changes. We're kind of going through negotiation points and concepts. So there have not been any drafting changes that I can think of since it was presented to the Landfill Advisory Committee, but I can certainly report after the meeting later this week.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Please.
I move to direct the county administrator to execute the First Amendment to the real estate purchase agreement with Oakland Baptist Church as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Were there any other questions for Ms. Lackey? Ms. Lackey, did you have any other business to bring to the board?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lackey. In that case, we will move on to the public hearing for access easement requested for residential property fronting Potomac Drive. So the supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised for the proposed conveyance of easement for access to residential property fronting Potomac Drive. We'll first ask for a staff report, and I will open the floor for public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon completion of public comment, we'll bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight depending on the information received during public comment. So we will move on to the staff report for the public hearing.
So as presented at the last meeting, there was a request that originated, I believe, from the realtor of a residential property at 5080 Potomac Drive. That property has an existing driveway that passes through 2 private parcels of property. One of those parcels is owned by a number of heirs. I think they number 20-some heirs at this point in time, so it's very difficult to get consent of that many people to something even as hopefully simple as a resolving where a driveway is located. So a request was made to the county, to Mr. Miller and I, to request that the board consider granting an easement to this property. The property is adjoining a county-owned parcel, which the county has owned since 1986. It's undeveloped, and it has a 20-foot access road that is it's joined by a few residential properties, including this one. Since the initial request was made, the property was sold, so there's a new property owner within just the past couple weeks. But my understanding through the closing attorney is that there's still interest in establishing this alternative access point. Mr. Pancotti presented at the last meeting. He was asked about community development considerations for this request. And community development, I wouldn't say they're necessarily pro or against, but they say that they have no objection because the relocation of the driveway would help bring a non-conforming access closer to conformance with what our current access requirements. There is a proposed deed of easement in your agenda packet, which would result in a non-exclusive easement. That means that it could potentially be granted to other similarly situated parties in the future if the board so chose. It would require private maintenance by this property owner until such time as the county accepts maintenance. So if the county were to develop the parcel or sell the parcel to a new owner who wanted to develop it and wanted to build a shared access way, I think that currently would be gravel. So if it was ever paved in the future, there might be maintenance, but only if it was paved at the request or by the county. And it would also allow the county to install utilities. If we ever developed that site, we'd need to install utilities in the road. And a 3/4 majority vote of all supervisors is required by the Virginia Constitution in order to grant a conveyance of public property. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Lackey. Do we have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my questions is the liability on the property. If something were to happen, we grant the easement and something happened by somebody coming to visit the person or somebody who lived on the property. What is the county's liability since they're using the road that technically is owned by the county?
It's a good question. So I did put in an indemnification provision in the easement agreement as well, so that nothing like that is ironclad. That doesn't mean someone couldn't sue the county, but we would have recourse. The person who would be the holder of the easement is responsible for the maintenance.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Stonehill?
Like I brought up last time, one constituent that has part of that property over there, their concern was that if we do this, is it going to make any type of hardship for the folks that are using it right now? Like, are they going to have any, specific driveways? You mentioned maintenance. Maintenance by who? Is it all the residents or just the requester that's asking for that piece? So are there going to be any effects on the folks that are using that driveway now?
So the current, if this easement is granted, this would be the only person who has been directly given permission by the board to use that access point, but it's non-exclusive. So if anyone else wanted to come forward and make the same request, the board could consider on the same terms granting a legal point of access.
Because his concern was, there's a bunch of families, obviously, like you said, that own this property and they've been using this driveway for, eons since cars showed up. But if we grant access just to one person now, is that going to create that each one of those people that are using it now and have been using it for a long time, they have to come in front of the board to ask permission to use it?
So it sounds like if there's any kind of use going on, it has not been formally approved by this board. So that's not to say that the board would do anything to restrict access, but this proposed deed of easement as written is specific to the one property owner.
I'm not really interested. I'd have to get some more information on that, I think. I mean, if we're only granting access to this one person that has this paperwork here, that's certainly going to affect all the other folks that have been using that driveway.
Mr. Collins?
So the person making the request already has a driveway, correct?
So as I understand it, there's an existing driveway. However, when they did the title search for transfer of the property, they could not find that it is confirmed through the deed records to be a legal point of access, so that they could encounter issues. And we call that a landlocked property if there's no legal point of entrance to the property.
So a easement that's owned by the county would be a slippery slope to allow one person to use it, and then, down the road, how many people will want to use it, and what will we be on the hook for? It doesn't sound like it's a good decision, government decision to allow an easement on government property, unless it's an eminent domain where you don't have a choice. Question and a statement.
So that's the policy decision before this board. I drafted it so it's specific to this one property because I only received the request from the one property owner, and because I did not anticipate that there would be interest in the county maintaining an access for multiple property owners. So the easement is drafted for one specific property owner, but it could be granted to others. But the users of the easement would be responsible for the maintenance and not the county.
So the real estate agent that was trying to sell this property had problems with the 20 heirs. So they want to come to the county and us solve the problem and say, yeah, you can use that easement to get to this piece of property, instead of figuring out something with the 20 heirs.
Correct. They have other legal recourse should they choose to pursue it.
Could I make a motion, Mr.?
No, you may not. We need to have our public comment first.
Thank you.
Yep, no worries. So I will open the floor actually for public comment now for this public hearing. So if anyone would like to come and speak about this particular public hearing, the floor is open. All right, Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online who would like to speak?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Did anyone receive correspondence about this to be entered into the record? Okay, in that case, I will close public comment for the public hearing. And at that point, yes, if you would like to make a motion, Mr. Collins, you are welcome to.
I'd like to make a motion to deny access easement for the requested residential property fronting Potomac Landing Drive.
We have a motion. Does anyone want a second? Okay, the motion fails. We certainly don't have to make a decision tonight. I know Mr. Stonehill seemed to be still concerned with it as well, so.
Yeah, I am not, unless, I mean, this is kind of like the old, the old country farm road that people have been using for eons, for generations and generations. Is it legal? Maybe it's not exactly legal because it is a county property, but it's been going on for so long that I really feel badly to say that, yeah, I'm going to grant it for one person, but the rest of those folks, you can't use it. And, if you are going to use it, you're going to have to come to the board and ask permission to use it. So I am not in favor of the way that it's written right now. If it's going to have access to this one piece of property, I really feel that it has to have access. All those pieces of property have to have access to it.
Mr. Chair, thinking about this, where I have a problem with this is, we're granting one person, and as Mr. Stonehill said, a lot of people have been using that for a very long time. And I could see possibly the new owner saying, now only I can use it. And what are we saying to the citizens that have been using it for a very long time? In King George, a lot of things have been done the old-fashioned way, handshake agreement. It just seems, without including those other property owners, giving them the same chance to have an easement, it doesn't seem right.
Okay.
So with that, I'm gonna try one more time because
Okay.
I'm thinking about it, and I should have seconded Mr. Collins' motion. I'll make the motion again to deny the request.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly second to deny the request. Do we have any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Could we clarify the motion? I believe it was imperfect in that it identified the street as Potomac Landing Drive, and that is not the street in question.
I'm sorry.
What? I'll make amendments. What is the exact drive name? Okay, I'll change it to Potomac Drive to deny the request for the access easement requested fronting Potomac Drive.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly second to amend the agenda. Do we have any further discussion? So this is to disapprove. So all those in favor for disapproval say aye.
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 Any any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. The request has been disapproved. Thank you. We'll move on to Davenport financial presentations. Mr. David Rose.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. David Rose here and one of my colleagues, Austin Sachs. As I know, you're used to seeing my other partner, Kyle Laux, who's on vacation. So you've got me tonight, so I apologize in advance. But it is good to be back. Austin and I will go through this this evening, and by all means, any questions or concerns, just stop me and I'll be more than happy to try to answer your questions. Again, David Rose, and we are representing Davenport as your financial advisor. So if we could, just a little background. We've had the good fortune of serving as financial advisor to King George County. I started working with y'all and going back to about 1986. So it's been a while. Kyle has been with me now 20 years, and so brought him in, and we again appreciate your letting us do this and give us that opportunity. Back in June of this year, when Kyle was here, he presented a capital planning analysis to you that included two primary projects, the fire and rescue facilities and a preschool requirement. And I'm going to address that tonight in terms of looking at that affordability-wise and a timetable should you decide to move forward. So with all that being said, we reviewed the county's debt profile. We looked at funding approaches to this project. And again, as your advisor, we're indifferent as it relates to what you do. We just want to see you do what makes the most sense. So it doesn't matter to us. It's whatever, again, meets all of your goals and objectives. And some of those include minimizing the impact on the cash flows and the overall debt structure, and making sure that there are ample revenues to pay for the project starting in the 24 budget and beyond. So we've also put in a timetable for the next steps. So what we're talking about tonight and what we've been talking about are projects that preliminarily tally $42 million. And that is, as you can see here, 14 million allocable to the fire and rescue, and then 28 million to the preschool. Now, we pointed out back in June when we were here on the 8th, and Kyle particularly with Austin, that these are preliminary, order of magnitude. And you'll also see that some of the assumptions that we've made in terms of debt service are equally preliminary, but we've tried to put it in a way that we've done in the past so that if there are some surprises, we're able to accommodate those and adjust accordingly. So what are our proposed funding goals and objectives? First and foremost, to make sure that the hard-earned interest ratings that you have remain that way. So to do no harm, if you would. For those of you in front of me as well as behind me, the county enjoys very strong credit ratings from the 3 national credit rating agencies. And in fact, in one instance, we're just a notch away from AAA, and the other 2 were just 2 notches away from AAA. So again, over the years, we've moved upward. And again, we want to make sure we continue to be in that mode. And the second goal and objective is to make sure that we ensure compliance with all the county adopted financial policies. Those are your self-adopted policies that we've evolved with over the years. We've strengthened them over the years. And as a result of that, it's one reason why you have such good credit ratings is because you followed those credit ratings by following these policies. A third thing, as I said there, is to try to make sure that we borrow this money in phases. And the reason for that is to the extent that the projects are lower than the 42 million, we have not overborrowed. To the extent that they are greater than that 42 million, we can adjust accordingly that second phase of borrowing that we're going to talk about. Again, the other points here, I think this is an important one. We want to make sure that we don't borrow all of it right now because there is the possibility for grant funding. And if we get grant funding, we don't want to overborrow, overissue, if you would. So we've set that up. Now, I cannot give you a commentary on what the likelihood of grant funding is, but again, we just want to make sure we're flexible in that regard. In addition, because the county is so strongly rated, we think that it's very possible that we may not even need to put collateral onto this borrowing. We've come a long way here at the county. There was a time when we had to put considerable collateral on anything we wanted to do. But because of your strong ratings, And because the recommendation we're going to make for what we call a public sale, which we have done before with you, we think it's possible, not absolute, that we can avoid having locked up or tied up any of the properties tied to the county. And that just would be, again, a flexibility for you in future. So we want to try to do that as well. We think that's possible. Finally, last couple of points, we want to make sure we maintain the county's strong reserve levels. That's one of your great strengths. And of course, the treasurer pointed out your fund balances. And again, one of those reasons why we have such good credit ratings is because you've had and adhere to strong financial policies, including the reserves that are available there. And I would point out to the citizens that with those reserves, and again, as the treasurer could point out, you're earning interest on that money, which further brings down the pressure on the general fund. So those monies are indeed being utilized for the benefit of the county for your annual budgets. So again, it's an important use of those monies. It also allows us to, again, be as competitive as possible with the credit rating agencies and investors, because they like to make sure that a county has some reserves in the unforeseen circumstances that some bad things happen that we're not expecting. And then finally, we want to make sure that we maintain what we call best practices. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Austin to talk for a few moments, and I'll come back and wrap this up. Okay, right there.
Good evening to the board. My name is Austin Sachs, and I work closely with Mr. Rose and Kyle. I'm just here to give some perspective on interest rates. They're always a key topic that gets brought up. And on this page, you're going to see on the left-hand side 40 years of long-term tax-exempt interest rates. And that's important because we, meaning the county, will be borrowing over the long term and more importantly on a tax-exempt basis. And as you can see, outside of the 40-year lows we saw due to COVID in 2020 and 2021, we're basically in a competitive and favorable interest rate environment on the borrowing side. And so if we flip to the next page, we've got what we have, Virginia SNAP rates. And so this is going to be for the investment of tax-exempt bond proceeds. And so this is closer to what you'll see in the headlines and making the news. And that's going to be your short-term interest rates that'll move more in step with Fed policy and short-term interest rates. And we can see that these are closer to 5%. And so we're in a very interesting interest rate environment where we're able to borrow money on the long term at or below what we can be earning on invested funds. And so if we flip to the next page, we'll talk about the specific proposed funding approach. And so we're recommending, like Mr. Rose said, a public facility revenue bond issuance, and that's a fancy public finance term for a credit structure that's ultimately the county's credit. And so that would be the moral obligation subject to appropriation security of the county. And if we go to the second bullet, we're proposing that we do this through the public credit markets, where we would offer our bonds to public investors. And we last used this for the initial funding for the courthouse. And if you remember, last year we came back and used a bank loan approach for the completion funding for that. As Mr. Rose said, given the county's very strong credit ratings, which speak for themselves, we're thinking there will be minimal to almost no requirement for the pledging of collateral, which is an added benefit of the public credit markets. And the last bullet there is just a specific tax structure of this financing where we'd use the EDA as the conduit issuer, but the county would make the debt service payments. And if we flip the page, we can talk through the actual phases of the funding. And so what we're proposing is taking that $42 million and breaking it into two even $21 million financings. The first one Mr. Rose will lay out a more detailed time schedule toward the end, but We're looking to borrow those funds, have them in hand by calendar year end, which we're in FY24, and then borrow that second tranche of money in the FY26 timeframe, which, as you know, starts July 1, 2025. So there's basically an 18-month time period from this first borrowing, where we're hoping this 21 million will get us through that 18-month time period, and we can borrow the balance as necessary, depending on grants or state funding or what other opportunities may present themselves. The third bullet there is speaking to the financing documents. The funds that we will borrow will not be for a specific project. They will be for general government capital. So we're not tying these funds specifically to one individual project. So as invoices come in, POs for each specific project, we'll be able to pay those as they come. And the last bullet and set of bullets is the time period, that roughly 18 months, we'll be able to work through finalizing the cost from these preliminary estimates, whether they go down, go up, and adjust as accordingly. And the last bullet there talking about potential outside funding sources, which we can use to potentially decrease that second borrowing size to the extent we are awarded any of those. And then I'll pass it over to Mr. Rose to talk through the last few pages. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Maybe I'll stop for a second, Mr. Chairman. Any questions that anyone may have at this point? Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Thank you very much. I see you again in a short amount of time. I'm going to ask you a question after I ask Mr. Miller. Do we have when we're going to get the study for the preschool back?
I do not have that answer. I know that when we started looking at things, I believe it was like a 45, 60-day process. Dr. Boyd, do you have a sense? I know that you were working with them a little bit more on some other parts of it, but I can get that answer for you tomorrow. I'm sorry, I don't have that right now.
All right, thank
I know
you.
they're working on it.
Well, I bring it up because I liked seeing the flexibility. So if it was feasible to have the design to possibly add the school board office with it, that in the preliminary design of laying down we're a fourth elementary school, I like to see that it's flexible so it's not tied to one project. So I appreciate that. And that's why I asked about the study.
It very much is flexible that way. So again, it's purposely set up that way, Yes, Mr. Collins.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Good to see you again.
Likewise.
So if I read correctly, the rate for government borrowing is around 4% at this time, right?
Yes, sir.
And so if you were to borrow the second $21 million, it's an unknown factor, right?
Yes, sir.
So there's no way to lock it in?
Well, there is. But again, I think from our perspective, interest rates could go lower. Yes, they could go higher. But at the same time, again, there may be some other grant monies. There may be some other ways to help mitigate some of that. The other thing too is let's assume in a worst case situation that it's now 18 months later, we borrowed this money and now it's time that we needed another 21 or so million. If the marketplace is not favorable, for example, we certainly have the ability to borrow on a short-term basis with the thinking that maybe it gets better a year or two later. So we have that flexibility. In fact, for a long time, that was the case for a lot of the local governments. We would be borrowing on a shorter term basis. We might borrow, as we called them in those days, bond anticipation notes. So I think there's some techniques and opportunities for us to do that. But I do think that doing it in two phases gives us the ability, again, maybe there's some grants, maybe rates come down a little bit. We've also factored in that short of the market moving strongly against us in the next few months as we look to go to the marketplace, I have put in here, and you're going to see in a few moments, I've assumed an interest cost of 5%. Now, we are seeing lower than that. As you said, Mr. Collins, we're looking at pretty much a whole percentage point lower than that. So if we can build that cushion in and get closer to 4%, then that allows us, if you would, to have that next 21 million to be upwards of 6% and still average, let's say, a 5% cost of money. So we've tried to do that. Again, could we borrow some more right now? Yes. But this just sort of felt better in terms of just not overdoing it, but at the same time, not just capitulating and kicking the can. So we felt right.
I understand what you're talking about, but the $42 million, I'm not sure if that's a realistic number. Fire and rescue would probably be about 19 million, and God knows what the preschool will be because of construction costs. So is there any reason why we're locked in at 42 million? What was the reasoning in that?
I'll defer to Mr. Miller and superintendent.
So, Mr. Collins, the 14 million is the estimate that Chief Moody and Mr. Cusenberry are, and that was approved in your capital improvements plan. We've got the debt service already in the operating budget if that happens this year. I would have to ask Chief Moody if he's getting a sense that number is gonna jump up, but I believe he feels that's a pretty strong number. The 28 million for the preschool is based on the information that we got back from Mosley on their initial work with Dr. Boyd and his team. And so I think there's a feeling that number, unless you add other things, that number's pretty good too. So if you start adding other things, then that's where you're going to obviously have different costs.
So in the year and a half I've been on the board, there's nothing that's ever come in at the number that started out. Everything has come
I
up
would agree with you.
higher.
Yes, sir. I agree
So
with you.
that makes people upset. So why didn't you borrow enough money?
I may want to add one more thing, Mr.
Yes, sir,
Collins.
please.
So let's assume that the undesirable happens, and that is that 42 million is not sufficient. So if we do the 2 phases that we're recommending, and let's say it comes in materially above that next $21 million tranche, what that allows us, and I think this page is a good one, that allows us the ability to do some more financial engineering, if you would, some cash flow structuring for that next phase so that we can then incorporate that. Because if you look at right here, this is your debt profile, and I think this is a good, healthy discussion because what you'll notice is from now up until basically the next decade, debt service is pretty much level. However, it drops down considerably after that period of time. So if indeed we find that we get that nasty surprise, that is that we've got to do more than another $21 million, I think there is the pathway there to be able to layer that in and not cause a dramatic difference in the debt service. Now, it matters how much additional debt there is, but really all we can do for the moment is go by experts that are telling us these are reasonable costs. We do work with Mosley, and I have for decades, know them very well. I think if there is a saving grace on this, it is that we are now in a mode where they know about supply chain issues. They know about surprises as it relates to capital and access to construction and what so happens. So I want to believe that 28 million is credible and has been, battle tested, but only time will tell. But I do think the way I've always approached this and the way I've tried to get Kyle to see this is to not assume that it's going to be 42 million, but to assume that if we get a bad surprise, we'll be able to adjust to it within reason. And that's sort of the thinking that we've got here.
So the courthouse, within a year and a half time went up $10 million.
Right.
So, I mean, you could be in the same situation. So both of these projects need to be done now. So you have 2026 as the second borrow. They should be already under construction. And
they will be. So maybe I'm not being clear, and that's my fault. What we're anticipating is to move forward very quickly on both these projects. But as you know, it just takes a certain period of time to spend that $42 million. So all we're really saying is, let's go now, let's get it going, let's get it started. But that second tranche should be tied to, as we need that next dollop of money, if you would. We're not slowing anything down. We're not waiting and saying, okay, we've done half the project, now let's go and do some other things. No, this is just trying to take cash flow management and do those kinds of things. But once you say yes, if you say yes to these projects, it's full steam ahead on both of those. And I think Mr. Miller would underscore that. So I want you to know that's it's a go. It's not a half baked.
Just one more redirect.
Yes, sir.
So if fire and rescue, if you had that number of 14 million,
Right.
if that was an accurate number, they could complete that in less than 12 months, including engineering. And then, so you only have $7 million to start this preschool.
Right.
So why wouldn't the first round be higher?
Again, I think when you look at it, by the time we borrow this money, let's assume, and you'll see the time schedule, basically it's effectively the end of the calendar year. And the way that cash flows work in terms of that expenditure out for the 14 million, it will not be that quick. It will not be 12 months. But to your point, if somehow that gets in effect sped up, that's not a problem. We will just then go more expeditiously to the next 21 million. So I don't want you to worry about that. We will make sure and we will monitor that with staff so that if indeed, rather than what Austin said is our plan, if you go back for a moment and say, fine, we're thinking beginning in July of 2025, which is basically, again, essentially 2 years from now, if we need to borrow that money shorter, we can do that. That will not be a problem. But we'll all know within the next 6 months, 9 months, how things are really moving. So again, that's I think the positive here. And it's no different if you think about it. When that project that you alluded to, yes, the courthouse went up in price. We didn't slow down the actual construction of it. We just said, fine, we need some additional dollars and let's go obtain those dollars. But we didn't have to slow the project down. Again, I don't know if anything you want to add, Mr. Miller.
So it took about 18 years to start the courthouse, and it's taken about 35 years to start the preschool. I don't know if you've ever seen that building, but it should have been gone 35 years ago. So, I mean, they're critical needs. And so as favorable rates, my view is you would be a little bit higher on the first round, but I understand your explanation. And I will not belabor that point anymore, but we need to move forward fast and fairly with good rates.
Well, that's our goal. Yes.
If I could also just add so we are obviously waiting on a report back from Mosley. Once we get that will be factored into what Davenport is going to do. The other aspect of this obviously is that what Davenport is looking for tonight is the direction, and I don't know that it has to be in the form of a motion or anything like that, but just a direction to move this forward. And obviously the critical part of changing it, adding to it, that will come because you'll have to obviously approve resolutions and you'll have to approve ordinances and things like that tie this money down. And so if this thing has to change in the next couple of months, we certainly will be coming back to you and talking about that. But I mean, our goal is to keep this moving because we understand the direction of the board is to move this project. And this is a very, it still could change a little bit when we come back to you again at the end of the process. Would you agree?
Absolutely, Mr. Miller. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Miller, you might be able to say I like your approach of what you've done here because we have a lot of opportunities to look for grants, and not only for the schools, but also for Chief Moody and his staff who've put together some grants that might come to fruition. So I really do appreciate this approach because it's being smart about it, because there is a lot of things at play.
So let's say that Fire and Rescue gets a grant of whatever, $14 million, and you get to 21, that'll all go to the school, right? Is that how that works?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I hope you're correct on that one. I would enjoy amending my presentation. So let me just move on. I don't have too much more to go, but I do want to show you all that when we look at adding debt, we think of it on a variety of ways. And one of those is some of your self-imposed policies. And those red lines are basically the lines we do not want to cross. And that is again, your self-imposed guidelines. And you'll notice here on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, we've got two policies that you've adopted and evolved with over the years. One of those, the left-hand side, I like to call it your credit card, saying how many dollars in a given year goes to debt service. Think of it as that way, or the mortgage. And what you'll find is that the yellow is all that proposed debt, that $42 million. It's layered on top of the other debts that you've already issued. And what you'll notice here, even with very, very modest growth assumptions on the denominator of expenditures, we don't have any spikes. We're basically staying pretty levelized. Goes to my point that if indeed we have a surprise, more than likely we are still going to be within our policies. We're still going to be able to accommodate that. So that's one of the things that I care a lot about on your behalf, and also one of those things that the rating agencies look at to say, if you're going to layer this in, are you going to bust your budget? And the answer is no. So I want to point that out for both of these. So that's another sort of commentary on how we think about this. But then let's get to this page. This really is basically the last page before a schedule. And that is that I have factored in with my colleagues a $42 million cost of funds at 5%, final maturity out there basically at 30 years. And then what we've shown here is where the rubber meets the road. And what we're saying is that all things being equal, we will need the equivalent of 6 pennies over the course of basically not just the next 6 years, but out basically a little bit beyond that. So the first time we need the equivalent of extra dollars from you is when you do the FY26 budget. So here we are, we've just started the FY24. Next year, you'll be talking about the 25 budget, but the year after, when you go into the 26 budget, all things being equal, if it costs us 5% as opposed to what I'm hopeful is 4%, and depending upon growth and what a penny is worth, we're going to need the equivalent of 2 pennies. Now, then we set it up so that basically over those next 3 years, we need the equivalent of the 6 pennies. But as you know, last year you had your revalve and it gets reset. Basically, this ties into the 2026 year when you have your next revalve. So we will, as we've historically been fortunate to get in front of you on a year-to-year basis and talk about how things are tracking. So again, this looks to be on a worst case basis that we will need the equivalent of 2 pennies. And that, of course, factors in all of the other debts you've already paid for. All those debts already baked into your existing 24 and beyond debt service, and into the 24 and beyond budgets. So again, if all things being equal, if we hit these various targets and our growth is not as vibrant, our interest rates are at 5%, we're able to show that in 2027 fiscal year, we hit the worst, it still is below that 10% target. It's a little bit over 9%. So again, we like that. Similarly, that last bullet point, it's at 2.8%. It's below the 3.5. So for our perspective, we've got some room to play. We've got some wiggle room, if you would. And that wiggle room may be in part taken up by costs that are greater or other projects that maybe you alluded to. So we keep thinking about this because we know, and I've been here 35 years, that again, that 2028 timeframe, there'll be other projects that we're going to need to do. Whatever they are, I don't know, but inevitably we're going to be layering in some other projects. And so we want to make sure we're not spiking, we're not broaching the policy. So hopefully that's helpful. Last point here is the schedule. If indeed, as Mr. Miller said, we don't necessarily need a formal action, but I think clearly we want to see if there's that desire by the board, if a consensus. Here we are tonight talking about it. We would be back with legal counsel to ask you to approve the financing documents as we've done before. That would occur as early as the September 5th meeting. We would then go through the Economic Development Authority in the 14th. And again, we will make sure that we have them all queued up with legal counsel to understand that they are really just a conduit. They have no financial liability, but here in Virginia, we have that requirement to do these types of financings with a third-party conduit. Then, if needed, you could see there you've got your second meeting of the month, possibly. Our thinking is to talk with these rating agencies early October, get their feedback roughly on Friday the 13th. I didn't put that date down, so I will change that for you. But seriously, around then, for those that are superstitious. But then at the end of the day, the goal here is we could close this and finance this and be done well before Thanksgiving without any surprises. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm happy to answer any questions and appreciate being here again.
Ms. Spender, did you have a question? Okay. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Collins, did you have any other questions?
Just trying to figure out your schedule for your agenda. I'm sorry. I was just trying to figure out your schedule for your agenda.
Okay.
Because you got a couple big things coming up for a public hearing, and I didn't really want this on that night if possible, because it'll already be a heavy night. But I like the timing. I don't see the August 15th on here.
We'll take a look and plan accordingly. So there is a placeholder there as well for Board of Supervisors to be in placeholder if needed. If something comes up and we maybe need to shift a little bit, I'm sure we can.
And I think the only thought here, and that's fine, that's not going to hurt anything except to say that most likely the Economic Development Authority meeting would then shift after this board took action. I think that would be doesn't have to be that.
And there's a placeholder for another EDA meeting as well. So I think that it provides us the opportunity if we need to, because there is a extremely busy meeting that it would fall on. We could maybe readdress it.
Us down. That's fine. I mean, all these other things, we could still be in the same mode. So again, if you want us to move that, just let us know and we'll accommodate that. That's easy. Or both of those.
We will let you know. I don't think we have a definitive decision right now, but I think probably will be okay at the moment. But yeah, we'll let you know.
Well, I hope that we can meet that Friday, November 10th date.
I agree. I would like to do that as well. Anyone else have any other comments or questions? I would like to move forward with this. Yes, obviously, we need a new preschool, right? So we need to find the funding for that as well, and it needs to be done as soon as possible. Ms. Binder?
Yes, I just would like to know or get an update of the study.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move to direct staff to work with our financial advisors, Davenport, and our bond counsel to bring financing documents back to the board for future consideration.
I will second.
All right, motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Y'all be well.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Thank you, Mr. Stack. Appreciate it. Chief, ambulance fee for service.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening to you. I know you have a pretty heavy agenda tonight, so I'm going to be fairly quick. If at any time you have any questions, please stop me and I'll try to answer them. Let me just preface before I get started. Most of the time when I come up to this podium before you as a board, most of the occasions I'm looking to buy something or spend some money in some way. Tonight, I want to talk to you about possibly maybe earning some additional money, possibly adjusting some of our fee schedules, talk to you about some policy decisions, and talk to you also about some pros and cons about this. I am not looking for any policy decision tonight. I'm just giving you this information for you to think about and to possibly, put as a placeholder. So I want to go through just a little bit of history. In 2007, we started our ambulance fee for service billing. That comes in the form of the board adopting an ordinance back then. Since that time, we've had one rate increase, and that rate increase was in 2013. This January, we saw the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, make the largest increase in history to the ambulance fee schedule at 8.7%. Due to the consumer insurance fees being significantly higher, these are your Anthem, your Cigna, your Kaiser Permanente, any type of third-party insurance billing vendors. The industry standard is to have your rate structure 30 to 50% above that of what the CMS national rate structure is. So currently today, we're at 16% above. And the recommended, rate structure is 30 to 50% above. Additionally, there have been some other changes in operational procedures and workflow within the county. And we believe that the practical application of our billing procedures and recommendations of our billing vendors. And I believe in your packet, you have a letter from our EMS billing vendor, EMS MC. And they are writing to us saying, essentially that national billing standards and practices are to be within that 30 to 50% above that of the Centers for Medicare service rate. These changes would require some text amendments to our existing ordinance and our existing rules and regulations. And there are no recommended changes, and let me repeat that. There are no recommended changes to the ordinance, rules, or regulations that would impact the county's compassionate billing policy or soft billing practices. So currently, if you are a resident of the county and we take you to the hospital by an ambulance, and your bill is $800, and your insurance company pays or Medicare pays $500, then you are not responsible for that balance. Okay, that's the way our fee structure is established. If you know of anybody, if you have any constituents, we know that this has happened in error before in the past. If you know of any constituents that have paid a balance and they're a resident, please have them contact my office immediately, because that needs to be fixed. One of the recommendations we do have is for uninsured county residents there would be a reduction in the liability from full liability of their bill to 25% liability. I didn't really like this policy in 2007. I still don't like it today. And that is where it stands right now today, is that if you we balance right off if you have insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. But if you don't have any insurance, then you're responsible 100% for the bill, unless you can, you have to certainly prove your financial documentation, provide that, fill out a hardship application, and then we have to review that and approve it. So this would be, one of our recommendations is to reduce it from full liability, 25% liability if you're a resident, and you could still have the hardship at that 25% liability. Uninsured non-residents would continue to be billed the entire balance, and so that's what we're currently doing, and what's currently in our billing practices today. We're not seeking any change in that. And that also currently is that our threshold in which we make a decision of whether you have a hardship is the U.S. Census most recent household median income. Okay, when we put this in place back in 2007, I want to say that the household median income in King George County was around in the lower 60,000s. Today it's 101,599. And so we utilize that threshold to say, if your household makes less than this, then you would qualify for a hardship not to pay the balance of your bill. And so I bring this to the board to say, is this something that we want to continue with as a policy practice, or is this something we want to possibly set at a certain threshold as the household median incomes are constantly increasing in the county? So this is our rate structure throughout our region, and this is where we are in King George, and essentially we're kind of right in the middle. We're a little low on some of the basic life support, and you can see we're in the middle of the advanced life support level 1, and then we're again in the middle of the advanced life support 2, and then our loaded mileage is $12 per mile, and that's from the time we pick the patient up to the miles that we drive to the nearest hospital. The recommendation would be to look at possibly going with the 40% above the Medicare rate. Again, the national standard and the industry practice is between 30 to 50%. That puts us right in the middle of that category. And then also increasing the loaded mileage from $12 per mile to $13 per mile. There's no secret that I come before you as a board in work sessions and say the fuel's going up, the prices of ambulances are getting more expensive, heart monitors are $35,000 a piece, etc. We're also recommending, and so is our billing company, that we add a consumable supply charge of $125 for basic life support transports and $175 for advanced life support, and also an oxygen fee of $50. So just to give you some perspective, for those consumable price charges, in our budget that was approved for FY24, we are projecting to spend roughly about $87,000 in consumable prices and consumable medical products and equipment. Oxygen is, I looked at last year, we spent to our vendor I think it was $7,102 for our oxygen vendor to come and deliver the oxygen and to provide that on our ambulances. So this would help offset that fee. Our new rate structure that we would be recommending would be $590 for BLS, $700 for ALS1, and $1,015 for ALS2, plus the additionals down below. So just to give you a little bit of understanding of kind of the payer mix and the calls, you can see majority of our calls are in the ALS level 1. These are patients that are having emergencies, but they may be life-threatening, but they don't reach to the level that they fall into the ALS2. The advanced life support level 2 is the most critical. These are where our paramedics are having to do very advanced procedures and multiple procedures. Our Our payer mix is, you can see that most of our payers comes from private insurance, with the second coming in at Medicare, the lowest Medicaid, and the 8% at self-pay. And I will tell you, being in this industry as long as I have, a lot of communities would be very envious of that payer mix. That your self-pay is less than 30%, and that your Medicaid is less than 1%. Having most of it private insurance and then followed by Medicare is a very good position for us. So during this 12-month period, we transported a little over 1,900 were residents, a little under 300 were non-residents of the county in a 12-month period. During that 12-month period, our gross charges were a little less than $1.8 million. And you can see that 55% were payments that were made, the 35% were contractual allowances, and these are where by our own policies, again, if you're a resident, you're not required for that balance billing. So those are in that 35%, 8% write-offs, and then 2% were balance dues. We'll go through this real quick. So if we elected to go with the 140%, and you can see if we went through each one, kind of a la carte, if you will. If we approved everything that we are recommending, we would go from again $999,321 of revenue up to $1.495831. So you can see the differences in here on the right-hand column that what it would make in each category. So that's a little more than roughly about a penny on the tax rate of making those changes and differences. What I suspect, and I told you I'd share with you the pros and cons. Right now, nobody else in the region is on this. Okay, they're not approaching their boards or not having these discussions. I suspect that they will in the near future. And what I don't really would like, I guess, to do is be known to have the highest rates in the region. However, right now, the entire region and our surrounding communities are outside of that 30 to 50% standard. And so I would suspect between now and probably next budget year, we're going to see Stafford go up, we're going to see Spotsylvania go up, and so on and so forth. I think it's some money that we're currently leaving on the table. And again, we're close to about $500,000 per year. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I add one more thing? So the next steps, if you decide to, would be we would have to come back. I would be working with the county attorney and county administrator on amending our current ordinance, amending our rules and regulations. Because it's an ordinance amendment, we of course have to go through the advertisement and public hearing. And then we would certainly, pick a day when that would go into effect as far as a new implementation of a fee structure.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Chief about this? Mr. Stonehill.
Thanks for coming out, Chief. Appreciate it. How does the billing company get paid? Just trying to get back to that. What's the name of that company? EMSMC, which stands for Management and Consultants. And we pay them we pay them a percentage of what they are able to collect, and they pay us. And that's pretty much the industry standard with billing companies. So they get a certain percentage of what they bill out?
No, what they collect.
What they collect.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just looking at these numbers. So like in the insurance world, I mean, you go to the doctor, and let's use easy numbers, and the doctor charges you $1,000, but your insurance company pays $500. That other $500 floating there, where's that going? I mean, I know that if they bill you the nine, whatever, say it's $1,000 to a trip for the hospital, ALS 2, and the insurance company is only going to pay 500. Where's the other 500 going?
It goes in
That's
that
just,
contractual write-off at that 35%.
so that's just the write-off.
Correct.
And the
For a resident.
billing company is only getting the 500 that they're actually collecting from the insurance company,
Yes, sir.
a percentage of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief. My colleague, Mr. Cupcake, did you have something you want to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to direct staff to move forward with developing amendments to the ambulance fee for service ordinance and amendments to the ambulance fee for service rules and regulations for future consideration of a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? And I'll ask if we could wait a moment for Mr. Collins to come back.
That's what I was just going to ask.
If I may ask a question of Chief, I think you and I had the conversation that it's not it doesn't have to be an immediate effective date. It could be a date that you all set. Is there some desire for a particular date as he works with the county attorney on the development of the ordinances, or would you just rather us get that first taken care of and then come back and let you have an idea? Because it could go into effect the next budget year, which would be July 1 of 24, or it could go into effect January 1 of 24. It could go into effect October 1 of this year. So it's up to the board to make that decision.
So I imagine that you'd come back with the proposed ordinances, and then we'd make a motion to advertise for a public hearing. At that point, could we provide that recommendation? I would hope that it wouldn't be overly complex to make a change for like an effective date, but it gives us a little bit of time to think about it, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are my colleagues amenable to that? Do anyone have strong feelings about a date right now?
The only thing I would ask, can we read the motion again? Just
Sure.
Mr. Collins.
Yes, I moved to direct staff to develop amendments to the ambulance fee for service ordinance and the amendments to the ambulance fee for service rules and regulations for future consideration of a public hearing.
So that was motion made and then seconded, and so that's where we're at. So we're at any discussion. So if there's any further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. Action items. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet is the VDOT's proposed State Highway Route 3 and 301 U-turn and Route 301 and Market Center project. These were approved back in 2018, and really all we need is a motion of support. Is that correct, Mr. Minor, as you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yes, I do.
With Mrs. Binder?
I have a question based on the development that has happened down in the Market Center area. Has that been found, and this is answering for a constituent has asked me, has there been any planning for the change, like Chick-fil-A is an example?
Yes, ma'am. Community development is probably a better department to ask that question, but I have heard that Chick-fil-A was consulted with this decision and was made aware, and I believe that their development plans are centered around what they're doing with these changes to this intersection. But please do not hold me to that. Again, that's a better question to ask community development.
We can find that out, but also I will point out that Ms. Cook is also in the audience who handles these things for us and has been in contact with VDOT. You might have had something to add.
I don't have anything to add to that. It is my understanding, though, that as they developed their project, that application and what was approved was part of their plan.
Mr. Chair, may I add to that? I had firsthand discussion with Mr. David Beal, the resident engineer of VDOT, and I asked him the very question, were they involved in meetings? Were they aware of these impending project or that project that would impact their plans? And the answer was yes. And I would also add that I developed these applications back in 2018, and I used as attachments the economic development sites that have since been developed upon, and that helped strengthen our application because part of how we get more weight to our projects or more points is economic development, and the other aspect is safety. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to direct staff to draft and provide a letter of concurrence regarding the design intent and major features of the projects from the 2020 Smart Scale approved applications.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you recall, Ms. Kupka, Supervisor Kupka had requested that this be put on the agenda. My only part is to just introduce it. It's associated with the development that's tied to Lake Caledon or associated with it. And I believe Ms. Kupka will provide you with an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing this to be heard this evening. So what we're looking for here is a letter of support from the board for the Trust for Public Land to submit a grant application in the amount of $1 million in funding from the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation. And the purpose of the funding would be used to offset required funds so that the Commonwealth of Virginia's Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, yes, Conservation and Recreation would be able to acquire the Lake Caledon property and annex it into Caledon State Park. And you may recall the Lake Caledon property is currently advertised as a residential development of 97 finished lots plus or minus 1 acre with private well and septic, and advertised as no proffers, no impact fees, nor infrastructure payments. So I hope you all would consider the request. I think it would behoove us to support their grant application to have this directly off of Caledon Road become part of Caledon State Park and not a 97 lot residential development. Thank you.
Did anyone have any questions? In that case, I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to direct staff to draft the letter of support for the Trust for Public Lands grant application in the amount of $1 million from the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So that's in my district. 97 houses located on that piece of property would be a disaster for fire and rescue. So hopefully this board can approve this. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Ms. Lackey.
So at the last board meeting, I was asked to bring forward a draft ordinance to prorate personal property taxes and to seek approval to advertise a notice of public hearing on such ordinance. Currently, if you are the owner of a motor vehicle, trailer, semi-trailer, or boat, and you owe taxes for the calendar year as of January 1. If you move to a new jurisdiction, you don't have to pay taxes in the new jurisdiction, but King George keeps your taxes for that remaining part of the calendar year. If you sell your vehicle and buy a new one, you'll get a credit in your new jurisdiction for the taxes that you paid on the old vehicle, but you'd have to pay the balance. So if this ordinance were to be implemented, if someone moves from King George to another prorating jurisdiction, so this is an optional authority of local government. So if another local government that has the same structure, then King George would have to refund taxes, any taxes paid for months in which the vehicle is not present. It's no longer garaged, if you will, in King George, but they would owe taxes to the new vehicle. This current draft does include an additional option to exclude proration of boats and vehicles that are of large weight, 10,000 pounds or more, used for hire by a motor carrier engaged in interstate commerce. So that's an optional provision. That's something that you may or may not want to include in your final ordinance. Stafford does exclude those types of vehicles. Jessica Washington did some research, and it looks like most of the surrounding jurisdictions do not differentiate if you have a boat or if you have a large vehicle that is involved in interstate commerce. They do not use that option to exclude you from proration, so that's a consideration. The proposed effective date would be January 1st, and if it is the will of the board, a public hearing could be advertised. I would suggest, due to the likely heft of the August 15th meeting, that the public hearing not be held till September. Again, it was proposed effective date of January, so there's no harm in waiting one or more meetings.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Lackey? Okay.
Do we need a motion? All right, I'll make a motion to advertise notice of public hearing for a proration of personal property taxes.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Mr. Chair, could I make a perfecting amendment?
Please.
To specify a date so that staff knows which meeting, so do we want to go with the second meeting in September 19th?
Yes, September 19th?
Yeah.
So I'll make that amendment to September 19th for the September 19th meeting.
So there's an amendment made. Does anyone want a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Motion properly seconded with the amendment as well. So at public hearing for the proration of personal property tax for the September 19th meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Ms. Lackey.
Also, at the last meeting, I was asked to bring forward a proposed ordinance to repeal the vehicle license tax effective January 1st, 2024. If implemented, the current budget for the current fiscal year, the 2024 year, does not include the loss of revenue for the second half of the year. So that is a consideration, subject to the will of the board. And it doesn't have to be a licensed decal, but separately in the code, some sort of decal is referenced for use of convenience centers. So the county would probably have to have some mechanism for still issuing a decal of some kind. It wouldn't have to be tied to a license tax. And once again, if it's the will of board to advertise a public hearing, I would suggest that it be advertised no earlier than for one of the September meetings. Or it could be deferred to the next budget cycle if you're not ready to account for revenue loss for the second half of the fiscal year, if it is effective January 1.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Lackey? Okay.
I'll make a motion and request to advertise notice of a public hearing for repealing the vehicle license tax for September 19th.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Yeah, any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Ms. Lackey and Mr. Minor. Advertisement of public hearing, conduct town hall for economic incentive ordinances.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I believe, Mr. Downs, do I have a presentation? So I'm here to provide an update on the economic development incentive zones and their revisions that was asked by the Board of Supervisors at our last July meeting.
If I may, Mr. Chair, while we're waiting on the presentation, in your agenda packet, the draft ordinances in underlining and strike through are the edits from the last draft that you saw, just for ease of review.
It was a PowerPoint. I think that's it right there. Yeah, 003. Is that 003? No, that's from the last one. Yeah. Thank you, Jackie. So this should be pretty quick. I'll just provide a recap from the last presentation, and then I'll go over the revisions that Ms. Kelly Lackey provided, and then I'll take any questions. Of course, got all these things here. So in the last presentation, I went over why you incentivize. We talked about competition, and how it's almost just required. As long as other localities and other states are incentivizing, there's really no option. We have to compete against those states and those other localities. There is a state match for some incentives that the state provides to a company, and that requires a 2-to-1 match or a 1-to-1 match for that incentive. There's also the reason for targeted industry growth. In this instance, we're looking at technology and defense companies to target. I went over the internal process, how it will be reviewed by my department as well as the county administrator, and then it will go before the board so that they're understanding what the qualifying incentives are and how they will impact the community. I went over the qualifications. For existing businesses, there will be a $500,000 qualification for capital investment, and I believe 5 to 10 jobs. For a new business, it'll be 1 million. For a tech company, those incentives can run up to 10 years. For a defense company, it can run up for 20. And the proposed incentives are up to 100% for a business license, business personal property tax, machineries and tools, fees and permits can be also rebated. So the revisions provided was revision 1, performance agreement provisions. So a failure for a company to comply with the following will result in the revoking of their tech zone or defense zone designation. So a failure to pay taxes, if they bankrupt themselves during the term of the agreement, if there's a change of use, so if they change from a tech business to another business, that will disqualify them and the county can revoke it, and also not abiding by county ordinances. For revision 2, the performance agreement enforcement. So a default in the performance agreement provision can result in the Board of Supervisors removing that designation within 30 days. Revision 3, a zoning ordinance. So one of the requests was making sure that we make it clear that that this ordinance does not affect the zoning ordinance in the county. So nothing in this economic incentive zone ordinances can be construed as an exemption of the county ordinance. I believe that's clearly laid out in the new policy. And then a non-exclusivity of incentives. So nothing herein shall be construed as limiting the Board of Supervisors' powers to grant other or different economic incentives permitted by other laws to technology businesses on a case-by-case basis and with or without the participation of the King George Economic Development Authority. So here are the proposed areas. So for these two incentive zones, we're looking at the Route 3 West settlement area, the 3 and 301 settlement area, the Dahlgren district, and then to zoom in, we're looking at the Claydale properties. So parcel, thank you, Chris, 1772 and 1724, and the commercial properties here in the front. It's approximately 500 acres that'll be included. And then just south of the 3 and 301 settlement area, we are considering these two parcels for an expanded business park. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sure Ms. Lackey and Jessica can help me answer anything in terms of the revisions.
Well, I have quite a few questions. So one is, if we're not having Fairview Beach area, there's a map here that has the different colors.
Yes,
So that needs to be removed if we're only going to be targeting certain areas. Because a map like this is telling people that you want it to be here. And so if that's not part of the discussion, that needs to be taken out for the public hearing. See up by Fairview Beach?
Yes, ma'am. So this is just a full map of all settlement areas in the county. And I'm just pointing out, instead of having a slide for each settlement area, we're only including the Route 3 West, 3 and 301, and then the Dahlgren settlement area. Those are the only three that are included in the ordinance.
I just wanted a little clearer. And then I still have some heartburn with the Edge Hill area because there's a lot of small businesses in that area. And we're saying that, hey, we want technology, data centers, renewable energy there. I still have a problem with the data center and renewable energy part for the fact is we don't even have one that have tested and now we're advertising it in other areas and a lot of it is in Shiloh. So I will very welcome to see the town hall because I don't even know if people are interested in that being a target. Now the second industrial site, I understand that, but I'm talking about the Edge Hill area where all those small mom and pop businesses are.
Understood. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, can I just add something that might clarify that? We're right now, the zones that you just pointed out, those 3 zones, we're talking about the first one we're considering is the defense production zone, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So actually, we're considering all zones for each settlement area, just so we're on the same page. So both zones for the 3 settlement areas that are identified on this map.
Understood. And would this need to be 2 different public hearings one for county defense production zone and one for county technology ordinance zone, or could it be put together as one public hearing?
They would be 2 public hearing items. They could be heard the same night.
Understood. Okay. Just want to verify. Did anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Minor or Ms. Lackey? So I know we had discussed holding the public hearing, but setting it far enough out that we could have a town hall. And I know we haven't scheduled a town hall yet, obviously. So, and we do have a fair amount of business coming up soon, and we've just put a handful of public hearings for the September 19th. Would we want to maybe look at the October meeting? Mr. Minor, would that seem like a reasonable time frame?
That gives me more than enough time. I think we did have some proposed dates depending on how fast the board wanted to move with the ordinance. I was going to recommend that we use an EDA meeting for one of those town halls. So I can provide those dates to Mr. Miller and Ms. Lackey and community engagement coordinator so that they're all aware of when we intend to do this.
So if we looked at, for instance, this October 3rd meeting for holding the public hearing, do you think that'd be enough time to prepare, schedule, and hold the town halls that?
More than enough time. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So I'll leave it to my colleagues. We don't have to go with that date, but just looking at what our current agenda looks like.
Mr. Chair, I believe they put up there some suggested dates for the town hall is this month, August 10th, 11th, 17th, 18th, 25th, 28th. I think you've got something on the 29th now, so you might want to, we would have to probably take that off. And then the 31st, and then you have September 1, 4, 7, 8, 11, and 15. So those are just some potential dates.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, the EDA has their meetings on the second Thursday of every month.
Okay.
I don't know which day that is in the September lineup, but that may work perfectly with the scheduling of the public hearings.
So the second Thursday in September is the 14th.
14th is not up there. So we can, so it's probably not up there because it's probably on there as taken, but the EDA meetings start at 5 p.m., can run about an hour to 2 hours long, depending on what's on the agenda. We could just add that town hall either as a part of the EDA meeting or separate before or after we conduct that that meeting, if that pleases the board.
I'll ask my colleagues how they feel about that. Okay.
14th of September.
14th. I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Collins. Oh, so
Dates up there. 7th is a date up there.
correct. So Mr. Minor was speaking to holding this in conjunction with an EDA meeting. And the EDA meeting would be on the 14th. And the reason it wasn't up there is because the EDA is meeting that day, so it's already held. So I think these were open dates is what
Correct.
Mr. Minor was providing with us. Ms. Binder, did you have something?
Yes, because this is a town hall, so how would that work with an EDA meeting? Because we want to make it so people can come up and ask questions, maybe look at some displays. It doesn't seem to go very well with an organized meeting. It needs to be a little more informal so people can come up and they might take 10 minutes to ask a question, not be limited to 3 minutes in a public comment.
I would imagine that one thing they could do is hold their meeting and then adjourn it and then open the meeting up, kind of like what was done on Thursday night last week on the zoning open house. So it'd be kind of similar to that. You could allow people to come forward and look at things and make comments, talk with the EDA members, talk with Mr. Minor and myself.
I didn't think it was necessarily in conjunction, like as in at the same time as the EDA meeting's occurring. I thought it was like a back-to-back.
Correct.
The EDA meeting would be held and then it would be after that would be the town hall, which would be a more open forum to have those conversations.
That's fine. So September 14th, possibly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can we get an invitation too? I
Absolutely.
always ask that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So then I would still ask if we want to make a motion to advertise for a public hearing then? Or if you guys want to wait, I guess we do have Mr. Dines. I see your hand up.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Fish said that there's a voter machine set up on the 14th.
Oh.
Where Ms. Lori come?
Understood.
What time does that start?
It's supposed to be all day, I believe.
Does she end at 4:30?
We can check.
Okay.
So if it needs to be another meeting space, then we'll advertise for that to get that.
Or we can target another date and make sure that it's properly advertised and marketed to get it out to the residents sometime in September. If it's not on that EDA 14th date.
Okay.
Is that fair for the board? I'm not.
Okay, so we're not going to advertise a date right now is what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah,
For the town hall?
Correct. We'll work out the logistics, make sure that Lori doesn't, that the registrar's office doesn't need that space up until the EDA meeting. Because since we start at 5, we can adjust our date, our timing to either start after the town hall.
Understood.
Or before the town hall. So.
Then I would say let's bring it back. I know we have looking to have a lot on the 15th, but at least to have a recommendation of when and where so we can make the motion to advertise for the town hall and the public hearing then.
So we want to have the town hall before the public hearing, or?
Yes,
All right, correct, okay.
that is correct.
I'm trying.
So, but if you can hammer out the logistics for the timeframe with Ms. Gump and make sure that it's available. And if it is, then we can, at that point, hopefully have a fairly quick action item to move forward with advertising. So is everyone amenable to that? Thank you, Mr. Minor. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Lackey.
So as you'll probably recall, last August, the board conducted a public hearing and adopted a resolution to request that the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopt a no-through truck restriction on Route 206 Dahlgren Road. The criteria for a no-through truck zone requires an alternate route, which is provided by routes 205 and 3, and recommendations from the local jurisdiction and VDOT. Mr. Beal previously indicated that he thought the VDOT district traffic engineer would be in support. So state regulations provide that the Commonwealth Transportation Board has 9 months to act on that resolution. And for whatever reason, they have not acted within the 9 months. I'm told they're ready to act, but now they've hit up this little procedural hiccup in that their regulations say they're supposed to act within 9 months of a resolution. So the recommendation from VDOT was the suggestion that the county renew its resolution to request to the CTB, to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, to enact this no-through truck restriction. Also lets you dust off that, and if you have any new factors that you can add into your argument of why it should be so restricted, it might be helpful to your case. So my recommendation is a public hearing be held once again for a renewal of that resolution that was previously advertised. This one you may or may not want to take up sooner than September. I defer to you all.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Lackey?
I don't have a question, but I do have a discussion.
Okay. What you got, Ms. Bender?
I have to say once again, because I'll probably be voting nay on this, is my concern is we're just pushing the traffic onto other roads that are not going to have a hard time handling, like coming through right here through the courthouse and on 205, down towards the trailer park in King George Elementary. But I will state today, I was behind a truck, a big truck, driving on 206, and they couldn't stay in their lane, and it was quite dangerous. And I even backed off on the speed, going behind them, because I kept seeing them go one side to the other. And I wish there was a better solution, but I am concerned we're just pushing the truck traffic onto another smaller road. That is my concern.
Any other discussion? All right, then I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
Mr. Chair, I move to authorize staff to authorize a notice of public hearing to renew a resolution requesting adoption of a through truck restriction on Route 206 Dahlgren Road.
Second.
We have a motion and properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? So do we have a date that we would like to set up for this public hearing?
Probably in October, I would think.
Ms. Lackey, you said to get it sooner than later.
I just didn't know if the board wanted to act sooner because it was already decided that the recommendation was to request it. So I didn't know if you wanted to act sooner or not.
Mr. Chair, I would try to get it on sooner than later. I've been talking to Mr. Beal about this, and it's just Richmond has been just dragging his feet on this. So I would like to see it have the public hearing, get it going so that they can continue their.
So you're asking for the August 15th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So there's an amendment. Is that a motion? I'm sorry.
Yes, for the August 15th meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, the August 15th meeting, there's a lot of stuff on it.
Yep.
So is there a rule that this board can't go past midnight, like the service authority?
If it gets to midnight, the board can vote to extend, and we have done that in the past. A couple of years ago for the villages, we did do that. That was a pretty lengthy public hearing as well.
Okay.
So it is available.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Lackey. Ms. Hahn. Department of Finance transferring remaining CIP project funds to the capital projects construction line for FY 22-23.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The annual appropriation resolution allows for the transfer of any remaining funds in a completed project to be returned to the funding source for capital projects. Below is a list in your board report of completed projects and the funds that remain in each one of those. And those funds, we're asking to transfer it back to the capital projects construction line for future appropriation to new projects. I won't go over all of the projects that are in there, but as you can see, this has gone back to some of the funds have been there since fiscal year 13. And we just want to move those back to the main line so that we can reappropriate those. So I ask that you authorize county administrator to transfer $1,618,270.82, and we need to do this in fiscal year 22-23 from the projects as presented to the capital project construction line for future reappropriation.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Hahn?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Kupka.
Ms. Hahn, can you clarify, please, the amount in the recommended action ends in 82 cents and the amount in your debit ends in 52 cents? So it's not balanced.
I thought I had changed all of those. It's the 82 that's up.
82 is the correct motion.
It was a 30-cent left off in the calculations.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Any comments? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to authorize the county administrator to transfer $1,618,270.82 in the FY 2022-2023 from the projects as presented to the capital project construction line for future reappropriation.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark. Oh. Ms. Pitts.
I'll pretend. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Megan Pitts. I am here before you this evening in reference to the award of a contract for the Barnesfield lighting retrofit. This procurement is being achieved through the James Madison University VASCUP Cooperative Contract Number UCP-JMU 6542, approved in the FY 2021-2022 Capital Improvement Plan. The Field A retrofit at Barnesfield Park will replace outdated sodium halide lighting with state-of-the-art LED lighting. This new lighting will meet the specifications for all major recreational sports associations and allow tournaments and recreational play after sunset. The system meets the 2018 International Building Code, provides consistent light levels across the field, 50-foot candles infield and 30-foot candles outfield, and ball tracker technology that provides targeted light to balls in play without glare for the players. In addition, Control Link allows staff to schedule lighting as well as use a web application to turn on and off lighting on demand. The system also provides off-site monitoring that reports bulb outages and other faults directly to Musco with 24/7 support. Finally, the system has a 25-year warranty, including materials and on-site labor. With that, I would request that you authorize the county administrator to execute a contract with Musco for the retrofit of Field A field lighting at Barnesfield Park in the amount of $214,882, subject to approval as to form by the county attorney. And I'll note that the quote includes a wiring replacement that is not being included with this procurement.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Pitts? All right.
Mr. Chair, I authorize the county administrator to execute a contract with Musco for the retrofit of Field A field lighting at Barnesfield Park in the amount of $214,282, subject to approval as to form by the county attorney.
Can I do a friendly amendment? Isn't it 882?
I'm sorry, yes, $214,882. Loaner glasses.
It's all good. Second.
We have a motion properly seconded for $214,882. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts.
Have a good evening.
You as well. We'll look up this time to verify. Chief Moody.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this action item is to approve a resolution, your attached resolution, and authorize the county administrator to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. I will say that we have met with the personnel with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. We've been meeting with them over the past year. We believe that this MOU is a win for both the county and for their agency. By signing this MOU, King George County will maintain and have the capabilities of a FEMA Type 3 swiftwater rescue team and will provide assistance in neighboring jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth or through EMAC request as staffing and operations may allow. The opportunities offered by the partnering with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management will strengthen our fire rescue, local water, and regional water response capabilities. So one thing I will add is this kind of goes hand in hand with what we brought to you a couple months ago with the Marine Incident Response Team and the Port Authority, the Virginia Port Authority Agreement. This one kind of works hand in hand with that, but it's through the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the details of this.
Do we have any questions for Chief? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
I move to approve the attached resolution and authorize the county administrator to sign the VDEM MOU.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Chief. I believe we are to the county administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would just ask for some clarification on Mr. Collins. You had asked for a couple of items. Could you clarify again what you were asking for, so that I have the information?
On page 8, I think it's the library, the didgeridoo, $450 for their presentation or whatever it was.
So it's my understanding, and Mr. Clark actually found that on their website, but it's a program for kids that are coming through, and that's what it is. It's going to be something that the library is doing where I can read it, what he sent me. Didgeridoo Down Under offers the most exciting Australian themed shows, concert workshops, and K-12 programs with music, science, character building, environmentalism, audience participation, and more. And so they're scheduled to come here. So that's all I know. I can find out more information from our librarian. And then you had another question, I think, about the Dominion. So we have not received anything, but we will press Mr. Dela Cruz or Mr. Picori about the follow-up information and then get that to you.
Yeah, I asked them to get back with me specifically about the specific questions I had, and they have not.
And I will remind them of that. Okay. The other items on the agenda for the county administrator's report. So you have the non-capital projects, which is on this list. And these are the items, obviously, that don't involve capital projects or major engineering work or major facilities work. But this is some of the things that we're working on. Obviously, you know a lot of these. There's some items that are things that we had put on. The formation of the Department of Social Services as a deviating agency from the state of Virginia. I think there was kind of a concern about what did that mean. It's essentially, there are two ways that the DSS can operate. One is they can operate specifically under the guidance of the state Department of Social Services and basically all of their policies and procedures and the way they run their organization is run through the state. Or there's another option where they can become a deviating agency where they could adopt the local county's policies dealing with human resources and other aspects of things. We work obviously very closely with Mr. Franklin and the DSS, and I know he is working right now with Mr. Metzler about how that could come together. It's certainly, there's no timetable on it, but I think that there's a desire to look into it as a possibility. Zoning ordinance overall, obviously last week you had the meeting. There is a proposal for the 29th of this month for the board and the planning commission to meet again. And then I believe there's another one that they're proposing in September where you would meet again to deal with the proposals that were presented at the meeting last Thursday. I believe we've asked for any written information to get to us, specifically to Mr. Pancotti, so he can forward that to the Berkeley group. If you have some specifics about the proposed zoning changes, we're asking for it by the 14th. So, and if you can't, and you want to just meet with Mr. Pancotti and Mr. Stewart, they've indicated they would be available to do that as well. So Ms. Lackey and I met with Ms. Hart and Ms. Puckett on the 13th regarding the reassessment committee. And I think that's something that will come back to you all in some form here very, very shortly in terms of what the proposals are and how that could be put together. But I know that they had some concerns and they had some recommendations about how that could come together. So we wanted to get back with you on that. Expansion of the convenience center at Perkins Corner. As you know, this was part of the original 17th Amendment, and then it now is part of the 21st Amendment. And as Ms. Lackey indicated, we are in discussions with the waste management folks, and we have reminded them, and we will reassert that it's in their best interest to have some kind of a proposal that we can feel comfortable presenting to the board, because I think that the board obviously has a vested interest in this, and we certainly want to try to get this resolved. There are a lot of things that we're trying to work through, and we will obviously notify Mr. Collins after we meet with them about what the status of it is. Second phase of the turn lane project for the middle school turn lane, as you know, that has been approved, and now we're working with them on the other part of it. There's no status update on the financial system replacement. Obviously, they're working with the team that's involved in that, Ms. Hahn and her group, and so that is an ongoing project. These are some non-capital projects for the utility, the water and sewer authority, and if you're interested, I presented this to them as well. But I think of most notable is the meter reading. That indicates no status change, but actually the status change is that they're ahead of the game and they're getting ready to restart the next phase. And I would also add that as part of the AMI meter reading upgrades, they're looking when they go into each house and they're looking at each connection that the homeowner has to the water system. They are looking about so that we can understand the kind of, lack of a better word, infrastructure, if you will, lead or copper, what type of a connection it is, so that then we are going to utilize that information to work with our ratepayers to upgrade, away from the lead and copper. I think you all got an email or a letter from Miss Higgins with the county school system, and she indicated that they had a lead testing associated with the well that is behind the preschool. As you know, there is a well that the school board has maintained. We have been, the service authority has been testing that for many, many years, going probably back to the early 2000s. And so we continue to test it. In Bowdoin, our contractor does that, and we'll continue to work with them. But I think they had an obligation to notify you as well as the school board about what happened. But that will be probably part of the project as well that we're working with. The only couple other items I would add is that there is a topping off ceremony, and that is not associated with ice cream or other things, but it is for the King George County Courthouse. So from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. On the 24th, you're welcome to come, and you'll have to wear a hard hat. You might want to wear some nice boots of some kind, but they'll take you up, and you'll be able to kind of do a tour of everything. This is kind of my understanding from Mr. Cusenberry is when you're building a facility like a courthouse, once you get the roof on top, and then the next stage of everything is that they're going to start drying in everything and putting up walls and things like that. This is where they have kind of a ceremony, a celebration, if you will. So the project is still on task. It's still on schedule. It's still very well run by Branch Builds and Mosley. And so, we should be having a courthouse here by sometime in mid to late April of 24. So very exciting. Again, there are some proposed dates for the Economic Development Incentive Ordinance, but I think that we'll have to circle back with you on that. Anyway, and I think there are some employee anniversaries if you're interested on the very last two pages or last page. Last two pages. Miss Washington is with us. Her first year, she's made it. But we have a number of folks that are in the service. I always like to call out the folks that have been here a while. Patty Norris Barker, 29 years. Melissa Fry, 28 years. Mr. Michael Thompson with the Sheriff's Department, 25 years. Also, Glenn Andrew Massey, 22 years. Your Commonwealth Attorney, 21 years, Miss Gussman. And then McDowney, Miss Virginia McDowney, 19 years with the Sheriff's Department in the Communication Office. If Miss Cook was still here, Miss Kim Cook was here, I'd ask her to pass on my congratulations to Kevin Cook, who's 19 years with us. So just to try to recognize these employees. That's all I have.
Mr. Ailer, if I could just jump in. Also, there's also a 25-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office actually sitting right here in the back room. Deputy Thompson, thank you for all of your years in service and putting up with us here in the boardroom.
That's it.
Mr. Miller, was there a resolution declaring the August 23rd, 2023 as First Responder Appreciation Day?
Yes, sir. I missed that one. So we would need a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, I'll move adoption of a resolution declaring August 23, 2023 as First Responder Appreciation Day in King George County.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Did anyone else have any questions for Mr. Miller? And do I see that there's a planned All Points Broadband presentation on the 19th of September?
Yeah, I'm glad that we write these things down. So, yes, the Mr. Ennis from the All Points Broadband indicated that he will be here in person on the 19th. He was wanting to do it virtually, but we told him very plainly that you all would like to have him here. So the 19th is the one that he can be at.
Thank you for making it known that that is what we're looking for, a personal presence. Did anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Miller? Okay. In that case, I will entertain a motion for a closed session.
Is this the current one?
The one I have, yeah.
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors convenes in closed meeting to discuss proposed local incentive package for major economic development project pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A6 for discussion and consideration of investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved. Where if made public initially, the financial interest of the county would be affected and the specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice, Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8. 2, I move the King George County Board of Supervisors convene in closed meeting for discussion and consideration of the performance and salary of the county administrator pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1 and for the consultation with legal counsel that specific legal matters, namely provisions of employment contract of the county administrator pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8. I invite the county administrator and the county attorney as needed because they are deemed necessary and/or their presence will be reasonably aid the board in consideration of topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-37112F.
Second.
A motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? I will ask, is there a need for Mr. Minor possibly to be in this discussion? Then could I ask that we have an amendment to include Mr. Minor to be invited for any pertinent business as part of the closed session? So I'm asking if someone would be willing to amend the, make an amendment to the motion.
I'll make that amendment to have Mr. Minor included in the closed session.
Just for the first part, not the second.
Just for the pertinent business, which would be the
pertinent business, yes.
Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are in closed session.
I move the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? We'll certify by roll call. Ms. Binder?
So certify.
Mr. Collins?
Certify.
Mrs. Kupka?
So certify.
Mr. Stonehill?
So certify.
The chair so certifies. We're back in open session. Do we have any other business to bring before the board tonight? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
All right, I would move to adjourn till Tuesday, August 15th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. right here in the Robert H. Combs boardroom.
Second.
Motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned.